allegiance to the flag of the United States. Liberty and justice. Members are invited to speak on any item that is not appear on today's agenda. The forum will be limited to 3 minutes.
We have 3 speakers on tonight. The first is Stephen Balfa. The second will be Kwan Singh. The third will be Jessica Lee.
And Stephen, you may proceed.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Stephen Balsfall, 51-year resident of Milpitas. And this is a full crowd, so it's great to see everybody together. I'm a member of the kickball community, and there's some things that we would like to recommend for consideration into the fiscal plan this year. I'm not going to talk about the details today, but we have been in contact with the council members and city staff, and so there's documentation that's available. We are in the process of forming a nonprofit pickleball club, and that's going really well. We have a very strong board of directors, and you'll hear 2 of them speak tonight. But one of the things is our motto is pickleball and it's people. So it's a lot more than just pickleball. It's much social infrastructure to it. And we've got a mission statement, and one of the statements is that we want to be a good citizen club in the city of Milpitas. So our objective is to be a contributor to the city both on and off. And I get to carry from my 3 days and makes me want to be a good corporate citizen. So we want all the same things in life. So thank you for the opportunity to talk to you, and good evening.
Thank you, Steve.
Next.
The next is Kwan Singh, followed by Jessica Lee.
Hello, my name is Kwan Singh, and I've been a resident of Milpitas for the past 32 years. I worked at Nyanza College for 31 years as a soccer coach and then the director of athletics. Recently, I retired. Steve and I worked together at the FIFA World Cup at Stanford University in 1994. He and I reconnected last year. Surprise, surprise, I started playing pickleball. In the 10 months I've been playing pickleball in Milpitas, I've seen tremendous growth and observed a diversity of players. The Milpitas pickleball community includes age, disabled, gender, racial, religious, and socioeconomic diversity, as well as members of the LGBTQ+ community. The skill level varies. One does not have to be a great athlete to play pickleball. The Facebook Milpitas Pickleball Group now has 387 members. The WhatsApp Gill Park Pickleball has 50 members. WhatsApp All Park Pickleball Group has 300 members. We have more and more people joining our groups, pickleball groups. Recently, we met with Anne-Marie and John to discuss putting an exhibition match and doing skills and drills with the seniors right here at the Barbara Lee Senior Center. This will be led by Ethan Chan, currently a Milpitas High School student who's also trying to establish a pickleball club on his campus. Currently, I'm working as a commissioner, overseeing 11 California Community College athletic programs. Many colleges are adding pickleball as a physical education activity class and planning the budget and building pickleball facilities. The California community colleges are also considering pickleball. Nationally, pickleball participant numbers are exploding. Numerous sources are indicating that pickleball is the fastest growing sport in the USA. Since I started playing pickleball last April, I have seen the Gill Park courts renovated, the creation of 6 courts at Hall Park. On behalf of the pickleball community, thank you for all your support. I hope you will continue the improvement of pickleball facilities in Milpitas. Thank you so much.
Next, we have Jessica Lee. My name is Jessica Lee. I'm a dentist. Been paid 4 months, but everyone is so ready to bring news to bring to so that's something that's more than just about the game, it's about the interaction. That's when it's even I was able to drag myself. So, and I would like to thank the tennis community actually for sharing their points with our and so the skills that play they will suit me right now. And so it bring out how much I love the people and the community. You can just walk out there in the parking lot and you don't get to pick up great news. You get.
So, moving on to announcement of conflicts.
Thank you, Mayor. Asking Mayor and each council member whether he or she needs any financial assistance related to any of the items.
Councilmember Barbadillo. Vice Mayor Chua. Councilmember Leanne. Councilmember
None.
Mayor Montano.
None.
Let the record reflect there are no reported conflicts, and Mayor, tonight we don't have any contracts or development projects on your agenda, so we don't need any further announcements.
Okay, thank you. So now moving on to the code of conduct. Is there anyone that would like to volunteer to recite this? If not, I will go ahead and recite it. Be respectful and courteous. Words, tone, and body language matter. Model civility. Avoid surprises. Praise publicly and criticize privately. Focus on the issue, not the person. Refrain from using electronic devices while on the council dais, and especially cell phones. Disclose conflicts of interest and affiliations related to agenda items. Separate governing from campaigning. The council speaks with one voice after making policy on issues. Respect the line between policy and administration. Council will hold one another accountable to comply with the code of conduct. Thank you very much. And now moving on the approval of the agenda. So moved.
Second.
So this has been moved by Vice Mayor and seconded by Councilmember Barbadillo. So we will have a vote, take a vote on this.
Councilmember Barbadillo.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chua.
Aye.
Councilmember Leanne. Aye. Councilmember Finn.
Aye.
Mayor Montano.
Aye. Thank you. And now moving on to the agenda items, we'll receive presentation on proposed 5-year 2024-28 capital improvement program and project to be funded through American Rescue Plan Act and provide feedback to staff.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council Members. Ashwini Kanta, Assistant City Manager. We're really pleased to be here today to discuss the proposed 5-year 2024-2028 CIP budget and to share with you some of the exciting projects that have recently been completed, such as Fire Station 2 and Aliso Adobe, as well as others that will be completed this fiscal year. We will also provide updates on specific city council requests and seek council input on these items. Michael Silvera, our CIP manager, and our deputy city manager will be doing the presentation today. And as you can see, we have all of our department heads here as well to respond to any questions you may have. As you heard from Finance Director Lai on January 31st during our budget study session, at this time, we do not foresee a reduction in current service levels in the near term. We are projecting a balanced budget for the next fiscal year and thereafter until Measure F sunset. However, we continue to see a big need for investment into the city's infrastructure, such as parks, utility infrastructure, city facilities, as well as technology systems. The overall CIP that is before you today includes over $243 million of approved projects. And important to note that 57 million of those do not yet have defined funding sources. We also have additional needs beyond the 5 years that Deputy City Manager Payne will discuss in more detail. As you know, our utility projects are planned to be funded by current and future utility rates, and projects in specific plan areas may be funded by impact fees. However, many other infrastructure projects do not have defined funding sources, and we have to rely on the general fund or special funds such as gas tax and federal, state, and regional grants. So at some point in the future, we will likely need to look at other funding mechanisms such as storm fees, bonds, and parcel taxes, but that's not something we will do today. For now, we're looking at some interim strategies to address funding needs. At the January budget study session, we discussed bringing forward proposed changes to the fiscal and budget policies that may allow us to set aside more funding from the annual surpluses towards capital projects. Additionally, as part of the media budget discussion, council also is putting $1.7 million towards general government CIP for infrastructure projects. This funding, combined with the unallocated ARPA funding, will help somewhat towards closing the funding gaps of projects in years 2 to 5. We look forward to council discussion and input on the city's capital improvement program and all of the community amenities and services made possible with the implementation of these projects. And so with that, I will now turn it over to Michael Silvera, our CIP manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashwini. Good evening, Mayor Montano, Vice Mayor Chua, and City Council members Van, Flynn, and Barbadillo. My name is Michael Silvera, the CIP manager. This evening, we'll be presenting the proposed 2024-28 capital improvement program. Next slide, please. During this meeting, we'll discuss the accomplishments of this past year, work plan highlights, the proposed 24-25 capital improvement program, review city council referrals, followed by a council discussion, and then staff will make recommendations. Next slide, please. Accomplishments. The next few slides, I will present accomplishments of the capital improvement program this past year. Next slide, please. Last August, Public Works successfully adopted this sewer, storm, drain, water master plan updates. The purpose of these updates is to evaluate the existing infrastructure systems and develop a comprehensive plan for future growth and infrastructure sustainability. The improvement recommendations are programmed in the proposed CIP. Next slide, please. Last May, engineering successfully adopted the Trails Pedestrian Bicycle Master Plan. It provides recommendations for connectivity, enhancement, development of the networks. Improvement recommendations are also programmed in the proposed CIP. Engineering also completed a feasibility study for the pedestrian overcrossing bridges on the south side of VTA light rail platforms. The costs will be analyzed as part of the Metro Impact Fee Nexus study. Public Works also successfully adopted the Climate Action Plan update which includes recommendation strategies and actions to assist the city in meeting goals to address climate change. As more programs and policies are developed, they will be brought forward for council's consideration. Next slide, please. Engineering, with the assistance of fire, IT, and public works departments, successfully completed the replacement of Fire Station 2. The new station included additional space for vehicles in the apparatus bay, incorporates sustainable elements to improve operational efficiencies and response times, and was built with current building and fire codes for essential services buildings. The station has been in operation since October. Next slide, please. The traffic section of engineering department successfully completed the annual street resurfacing project. The streets in the neighborhood east of South Sports Center complex from Calaveras to Cal Oriente was resurfaced. The neighborhood is highlighted in the middle picture of the slide. In addition, the project installed 92 ADA curb ramps and flashing beacons as a traffic calming measure at the intersections of Phelan and Kennedy, South Park Victoria and Mount Shasta, North Park Victoria and Kennedy. The street selected annually for resurfacing is based on the pavement management program. The goal is to maintain or improve the city's PCI value of 70 or better. The current city's PCI value is 72. Next slide, please. Next slide. The Viso Adobe Park is a 20-year plus project that's completed its final phase. If These Walls Could Talk exhibit in the Adobe House. The project installed an audio-video system and exhibits to showcase the history of the property and the city of Milpitas from the late 1700s to present time. The house opened to the public for tours this past November. The pictures shown on this slide are some exhibits that were placed in the house. Next slide, please. Phase 1 of McCandless Park is anticipated to open early summer after the completion of the sports field. This phase constructed the main core of the park, which includes 2 all-inclusive playgrounds, community and butterfly gardens, picnic areas with gazebos, dog play area, pathways, amenities, restroom, and utility sheds. I'll talk a little bit more about the remaining phases in this presentation. Next phase, please. As part of the mural program, Parks and Recreation Services selected the artist William Peterson to create a colorful mural at the base of the Montague pedestrian overcrossing in front of the Edge Apartments. This represents people from diverse backgrounds coming from different directions. The abstract design incorporates the history of Milpitas, such as the Lonely Fisherman in the Canoe, the Ford Motor Company logo, and the automobile manufacturing plant. Next slide, please. Here are a few notable projects that were completed by Public Works. The first 3 projects on the list are part of the Energy and Water Savings Program. These projects install automated water meters, water fixtures, and LED lighting throughout the city. In addition, they completed the streets sweeping pilot program and are planning the next phase of the program for council's consideration. The facilities section replaced the boilers, installed exterior signs at the Public Works and Police departments, repaired the stucco, and painted the exterior of the Public Works Police IT building. They also completed the installation of the no-smoke devices in all fire engines to filter diesel emissions from entering the atmosphere of the fire station. Next slide, please. Here are a few more notable projects that were completed by Public Works. The park section resurfaced the tennis courts at Hall Memorial Park and basketball court at Peter Gill Park. They also converted a portion of the tennis courts at Hall Park and handball courts at Peter Gill Park for the pickleball pilot program. The street section completed their annual spring sidewalk repair project, and the utility section replaced pump number 3 at Main lift station that has exceeded its service life. Next slide, please. Now I'll talk about projects scheduled to be completed in 2023. Next slide, please. Phase 2 of McCandless Park is the construction of the joint shared sports field between the school district and the city. The field is equipped with field lighting, recycled irrigation system. Is anticipated to be completed in early summer. After the park opening, engineering will be focusing on permitting and construction of the pedestrian bridge and well, which is anticipated to start in 2024. Next slide, please. Santa Clara Valley Water District will be completing improvements to increase flood capacity for portions of the Clara and Lower Penitentiary Creeks. The city has been coordinating with the district on permitting and city public right-of-way improvements. Next slide, please. The planning department completed the adoption of the Metro specific plan a few weeks ago. The plan focused on expanding residential opportunities and looked into opportunities to support development of office and employment elements. The next step is to prepare an impact fee nexus study to determine the cost of new infrastructure needs in the Metro specific plan and update the current task area development impact fee. Engineering will be completing the self-evaluation of cities, services, programs, and facilities for the compliance with the American with Disabilities Act and develop a transition plan to correct deficiencies over a period of time. Next slide, please. Park rehabilitation project funded by ARPA. Let me provide a brief background on the project. Back in August 9th of 21, City Council approved approximately $4.4 million in ARPA funding for improvements to the park's infrastructure at 20 of the 36 parks. The funding includes estimated $2.1 million to address health and safety repairs, an estimated $1.1 million to address short-term improvements at 4 parks in critical condition, which are Sandalwood, Sinot, Strickborough, and Starlight parks. An estimated $1.2 million to address short-term improvements for 8 parks in poor condition, which are Murphy, Robert E. Brown, Foothill, and Rogers, Park Mitchell West, Hidden Lake, Oliver Jones, and Sunny Hills Albert Augustine. Next slide, please. Now I'll provide you a status of the project, where it's a joint effort between Engineering and Public Works Department. As mentioned in last week's council meeting, Public Works awarded a construction contract to GG Builders in December to address the immediate health and safety repairs for 9 parks, which are listed to the left of the slide. The work will repair play structures and surfacing and miscellaneous pavement and drainage and fencing. Engineering has started to design for short-term improvements for 13 parks, which is listed on the right side of the slide. The park will focus on improving ADA access, pathways, picnic areas, playground areas, and site furnishings and restrooms. The project is anticipated to start construction in spring of 2024. I'd like to note 2 parks that overlap between the 2 departments, which is Sunny Hills and Tom Evatt Parks. Next slide, please. Here are a few notable projects scheduled to be completed this year by Engineering and Public Works. Engineering will complete the Annal Street resurfacing project. The streets to be resurfaced are Dempsey Road between North Park Victoria to Yosemite Drive, and in the neighborhood of the northeast area of between Jackman Road and 680, and the neighborhood west of Abbott and north of Calaveras Boulevard. Engineering will also request proposals for design of Cardozo Park softball fields and Fire Station 1 module building replacement. Public Works is anticipating to complete the replacement of the electrical scoreboards at Sports Center and Dixon Landing Sports Field, the annual fall sidewalk repairs, continued replacement of streetlights and signage backlog, and the community and senior center solar project. Next slide, please. Now I'll discuss the 5-year budget of the capital improvement program. Next slide, please. The capital improvement program, better known as the CIP, is a comprehensive 5-year budgeting and planning tool for infrastructure needs that is updated annually. The document includes priority city capital projects for new infrastructure and repairs and replacement of existing infrastructure backlog. It outlines the improvements, associated expenditures, anticipated project schedules, and funding sources. The document is organized into 6 categories: community, parks, streets, water, sewer, and storm drain improvements. Only the funding requests in the first year of the proposed CIP are funded, which will be effective July 1st. Project in subsequent 4 years may be partially funded based on projected available funding or not funded at all. Next slide, please. City Council has adopted 7 priority areas as shown on the slide, and the CIP is completed in conformance with these priorities. Next slide, please. New projects and scope and funding changes to existing projects requested by departments are reviewed, prioritized, and ranked by the engineering and finance departments for conformance with council priorities, available funding, and resources. The ranked project list is then discussed with the city's manager office for recommendations to the city council. Criteria for ranking the funding request are listed here on the slide. I'll give you a few seconds to review this list. Next slide, please. During the city council budget study session on July 1st, staff reported that it does not foresee a reduction in current service levels based on new revenue, information, labor contracts, and various funding and expenditures strategies. A balanced budget is projected for 2023 and 24 and thereafter until Measure F sunsets. Staff also discussed the possibility of aligning the reserve policies to start addressing the aging and long-term cities infrastructure needs, which is primarily supported by the general fund. Recommendations to the city's reserve policies will be brought forward as part of the proposed operating budget process. Next slide, please. The 5-year CIP is a budget brought forward tonight consists of 148 projects for an estimated budget amount of nearly 144 million. The budget includes projects with insufficient or no funding, which is estimated at 55 million over the 5 years. Of the 57 million, there is a funding needs. The funding need of 34.5 million is for new infrastructure project, and the funding needs of 22.5 million is for repair and replacement of existing infrastructure backlog. The value of insufficient or no funding assumes city council will adopt sewer and water rate fee adjustment proposal this coming March. If not, the value would increase approximately to 107.6 million. The chart is a breakdown of estimated cost, the associated number of projects for each category. Next slide, please. Here's a table that summarizes the estimated project cost, projected available funding, and insufficient or no funding per fiscal year over the next 5 years. The top row shows fiscal year, then followed by the total estimated projects cost for a total value of nearly 244 million. Then it's followed by a projected available funding, which is estimated nearly at 166 million. Then it's followed by external financing of 21 million. The bottom row is the value of insufficient or available funding for projects, which is estimated at 57 million over the next 5 years. Next slide, please. Here is a summary of the proposed funding for each category in fiscal year 23-24, which would be available starting July 1st. Staff is proposing to fund 47 projects for an estimated cost of $30.6 million. Approximately 75% of the funding will be dedicated to projects in the community, streets, and sewer categories. Next slide, please. There was an error in the fiscal impact table. In the fiscal table of the agenda report, the park fund balance was estimated at 2.9 million which is actually 1.8. Therefore, the available funding after the approved funding will be approximately $45,000 to be discussed later in the presentation. Thank you, Dan. Next slide, please. The next 6 slides are the list of 47 projects that are being proposed to be funded this coming fiscal year. Each table shows a project, the recommended funding amount, and the proposed funding source or sources. The next few slides are 18 projects in the community category being proposed to be funded. Here's a list of existing projects that are proposed to be funded. Majority of these projects are for the upkeep of the city's existing infrastructure. I would like to highlight a few projects as you review this list. City building roofing repairs. The funding is for the design of the roof replacement at the community center building and the replacement of the metal roof of the city library, which has exceeded their service life. Fire Station 1 module building replacement project requires additional funding due to the escalation cost of material, identified site improvements, and hazardous materials removal requirements. Portion of the project would be funded through ARPA funding of $250,000. The Human Resource Information System project is for the replacement of the aging system. Portion of this project will also be funded through ARPA of $1 million. Public safety mobile computer terminals. The proposed funding is to replace all computer terminals in the fire vehicles, which is essential to day-to-day operations in the field. Next slide, please. Here's a list of 6 proposed new community projects. I would like to mention a few as you review this list. The replacement of the audio video system in the council chambers is an aging system which is unpredictable, technically obsolete, and doesn't meet the standards for hybrid public meetings. The replacement is scheduled for city council summer session in 2024. Financial system enterprise resource planning. The project provides replacement of the 25-year-old financial system. The watershed analyst will support and maintain the city's FEMA community rating, which determines flood insurance premiums. Currently, the city's residents purchase flood insurance at a 15% discount for the premiums due to the city's Class 7 rating. A new project to the CIP is the Gateway Signage Project. It will install signage with new logo at entry points into the city. This new infrastructure project received a developer's contribution of $250,000. Next slide, please. Here are 6 projects in the park category being proposed to be funded in the amount of $1.6 million. 4 of these projects is for the upkeep of the city's existing park infrastructure. Another new project being proposed to be added to the CIP is for the replacement of the aging sports center football home bleachers. The funding is for the design of the project. Give me a few seconds to review this list. Next slide, please. Here are 10 projects in the streets category being proposed to be funded in the amount of $7.9 million, which are typically dedicated for the upkeeping of existing infrastructure. The street resurfacing project for fiscal 23-24 is planning to resurface Thompson Street and Great Mall Parkway from 880 to Abel Street. I'd like to note the estimate to resurface the entire Great Mall Parkway is approximately $8 million. There's insufficient funding in the project, in the fund for this project in fiscal year 23-24, and it will have to be phased over 2 years. The remaining portion of Great Mall Parkway is anticipated for 24-25, pending the progression of the private development projects between McCandless Drive and Centerpoint. One project I would like to highlight is the bicycle improvement project. The city received an allocation of a one-time state funding grant of $1 million to improve the bicycle network along high traffic bike lines and signalized intersections. Pause here for a few seconds for the review of this list. Next slide, please. Here are 6 water projects being proposed to be funded in the amount of $3.5 million by water fund. I'll pause here for a few seconds. Next slide, please. There are 5 sewer projects being proposed to be funded by sewer fund in the amount of $8 million, and 2 storm drain projects being proposed to be funded by the storm drain fund in the amount of $1.9 million. Next slide, please. This table shows the funding distribution of the major funding sources among each category. $2.4 million from the general reserve funds will fund the replacement of the AV system in the council chambers and finance system, which are in the community category. $4.4 million from the general government CIP fund will fund majority of the community project. $1.5 million from the park fund will fund park projects. $8.3 million from the sewer fund will fund sewer related projects. Majority of this amount will fund the city's contribution to the rehab project at San Jose wastewater facility. The street funds include gas tax, Measure B, SB1, and the street improvement fund will fund approximately $6.3 million in street related projects. Approximately $3.8 million from the water fund will fund water related projects. And in the last column there, approximately $3.5 million from several funds such as grants, LLB, public art, storm drain fund, and tax impact fees will fund community, streets, and storm drain related projects. Next slide, please. Here are 15 projects that are being recommended to be funded by the general government CIP fund for an estimated amount of $4.4 million. The fund will fund 11 reoccurring projects listed to the left of the slide and 4 new projects that is listed to the right of the slide. I'll give you a few seconds to review this list. So next slide, please. So now I'll hand over the presentation to Deputy City Manager.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of the City Council for your time tonight. Next slide, please. So as Michael mentioned before, in the proposed CIP, there is of the projects that are subject for approval, there's a gap of $57 million. This is a difference between what we project to be available in the current 5-year CIP and the projects that are approved. The pie chart on the upper right shows this 57 million broken down between project type. As you can see, streets is a very large number in there, and parks as well. And there's obviously other needs in the other areas as well. The lower slide on the bottom right breaks this down between this 57 million down between new infrastructure, items that don't exist in the city today, amenities that we don't have, or amenities that we may want to make larger and bigger, versus infrastructure that just needs to be repaired and replaced, that is aging. And so you can see that breakdown of that $57 million, $34.5 million for repairing existing infrastructure versus 22.5 for new infrastructure. As Michael mentioned before, this 57 million would turn into 107 million if we don't proceed with the rate the increases at next month's City Council meeting. We'll be able to talk about that more at the meeting, but we want to just put that in perspective that this does. Power go on. Sorry, I think the light went off on the mic. So we'll talk about that more as we go forward tonight and at next month's City Council meeting regarding those rate fees. Next slide, please. This slide is a list of specific projects in that $57 million with insufficient or no funding in the 5-year CIP. We will continue to seek grant opportunities for these projects. Some, such as Main Street, could be paid wholly or partially by developer fees in the future. And we will continue every year to try and identify monies either through the general fund, grants, legislation, or other resources to continue to fund these important projects that have been approved by the city council. Next slide, please. Milpitas has done a great. Sorry, hang 1 second here. Yeah. Go back. All right. Okay, battery is dying. Thank you. All right, so Milpitas has done a great job in the past few years of completed master plans for various portions of our infrastructure, including parks, sewers, and water. But we still have some planning work to accomplish, especially with our building facilities. This work that has been done over the past several years has really helped us to get a better handle on our long-term infrastructure needs. And as opposed to just kind of guessing what we may need, this detailed planning work has really allowed us to develop some really good plans for moving forward. In addition to the funding needed in the next 5 years, there's a number of projects proposed that we need to or like to proceed with that are not currently in the proposed budget. And as noted on here, our estimate of all those projects that we want to do in the future between new projects or backlog projects outside of the 5-year CIP is $427 million. Next slide, please. And this slide and the next, and then this slide just shows some of those projects that are still needed beyond the 5-year CIP, but need funding that we don't have identified at this point in time. But again, as Assistant City Manager Kantak mentioned earlier, there are various financing options we can look to in the future. Next slide, please. In summary, the total backlog of identified repair, replacement, and new projects, so funding we do not have identified yet, is $484 million. When looking at this number, it is critical to differentiate between the infrastructure backlog, existing amenities that need repair of $264 million, and for new infrastructure of $219 million. And it is also important to remember that the near-term number would increase by $50 million if we do not move forward with the increase next month. And we'll again talk about that further at that meeting next month. To fund these CIP needs over the next several years, we need to ensure we keep up with appropriate rate increases. As an example, when we look at the beyond 6 years infrastructure backlog number of $230 million, a lot of that could be handled in the future. About half of that could be handled if we continue 5 years from now to adjust the rates to keep up with the expenses and infrastructure needs. We want to make sure we continue to set appropriate fees for new development, such as the metro area. We want to continue to look really hard for alternative funding sources, such as grants, legislation, financing mechanisms that could include geo bonds or other parcel taxes or other to make up the funding gaps. And most importantly, we need to continue to maintain fiscal discipline. Even with large repair replacement backlog, it doesn't mean that we will not fund new amenities. However, it does mean that when we are funding new amenities, we need to always be aware that the backlog of things that need to be fixed today exists, and ensure that we're making the choices, weighing the needs of what needs to be fixed against a new amenity when we're making those choices. Next slide, please. Michael's already covered the parks need, but just wanted to reiterate this again. With the great master planning work that was accomplished in the past few years, we have a really good handle on the condition of our parks in Milpitas. As an example, this slide, in the master plan, there's 24 parks that were represented as in good to fair condition, and 12, the next wall there, that are in poor to critical condition. Additionally, the report split the funding needs into 2 categories, high priority and long-term. And you can see 8 million of high priority needs and 85 million of long-term needs. To date with ARPA, as Michael mentioned earlier, we programmed 4.4 million towards the highest of those high priority, really focusing on the public safety needs, in addition to some other key infrastructure repairs that must get done. And so that's where that initial 4.4 was allocated towards those 20 parks. However, to get all the high priority repairs that are identified in the master plan, we still need to identify an additional $3.6 million, where we will continue to look for that funding over time to make sure that we can keep our parks in as best shape as possible. On the next slide, please. The next set of slides is a city council referral projects. So throughout the city council referral process, there's certain referrals and discussions that are related to CIP projects, and we've listed those on the next few tables, and they're also in the agenda report. This first table represents city council yes, thank you. This first table represents city council priority areas that staff recommends funding in the adopted CIP. They are not yet included in the proposed CIP, but would be included in the adopted if supported, if directed and supported by the mayor and city council. And I'll, next slide, please. The first one on that table we just looked at is pickleball. The city has implemented a very successful pickleball pilot program at multiple parks in the city. The most cost-effective way to achieve a permanent pickleball facility would be to convert an existing tennis facility. However, we are not making any recommendations tonight for the mayor and city council to do that conversion. What we are showing as an option for the mayor and city council is to allocate $200,000 towards pickleball so that if and when a permanent option could be identified with the community and with the appropriate community outreach, that the money would be available. And so that is an option for city council to consider and discuss tonight. Next slide, please. As the mayor and city council are aware, we own 3 parcels as shown on the image on the right on South Main Street. And there has been discussion over the years on a police substation and possibly locating it here. A police substation in the southern part of the city would allow us to better meet the needs of our residents. In order to fully understand the ability for one of these parcels to house a police substation, staff recommends allocation of $200,000 from developer impact fees for a formal feasibility analysis of converting one or a portion of one of these parcels on South Main Street to a police substation. If city council approves this allocation, this analysis would begin immediately and would be completed in fall of 2023. Next slide, please. The next 3 slides provide information about city council referrals where staff does not recommend adding additional funding today and at this time as described, and the reasons for that are described further in the following slides. Next slide, please. The first one is the teen center. In July 2012, the teen center and the sports center were closed due to budget cuts. Teen center at the sports center was closed due to budget cuts. And in November 2018, city council and the city reopened the teen center at the senior center. In February 2023, the city council provided direction to staff to analyze potential options for this teen center. So that process is starting, and a next step will be surveying the teens on what their needs are and location and priorities, et cetera. And that is beginning in the very near future. And once that process is completed, staff will return to the mayor and city council with the results of the analysis. And at that time would be an option to possibly allocate funding towards an ongoing solution if that's, yeah. So at that time, and so at this time, we don't have enough information in order to make any specific recommendations for funding. Next slide, please. So as mayor and city council are aware, was discussed at the priority setting session, there's a vacant city parcel at Adobe Avenue and Vasona Street next to Able. And in February 2023, council directed staff to conduct community outreach to determine if this existing neighborhood near that parcel would support a community garden. That outreach will begin in the near future. If the community does support that, the next step would be to do a formal feasibility analysis of putting a community garden here, which has been estimated at $50,000. Staff will return to the mayor and city council once the outreach is completed for a discussion on whether mayor and city council would like to continue investigating this site, and that would possibly include a budget allocation at that time. Next slide, please. We have 2 projects in the proposed CIP that are have been supported by the mayor and city council, but are unfunded at this time. It's the undergrounding of utilities on Main Street, as well as lighting on Main Street. The cost estimates, depending on how much of the scope of these projects is completed, could range anywhere from $2 to $10 million. Staff recommends at this time holding off on any specific allocations to this project until the Main Street Gateway Street fee analysis is completed in 2024, so we can come up with a good plan, a realistic timeline for being able to fund the improvements. Next slide, please. This slide provides a summary of 3 specific council referrals, which we feel are already taken care of and completed either through the CIP. I'm not saying they're done, but they're funded, and that's why they're shown as completed on this slide. Selwyn Park was discussed last week at council, and we have allocated the $97,000 through ARPA funds in order to continue, in order to do more than we had additionally done in the original scope of the project. The skate park memorial plaque in January at the study session on the operating budget, it was approved by the mayor and city council to install the plaque at the skate park in memory of a young skater who passed away. And so that is proceeding and funded. Automated license plate readers, and the police department has installed 35 cameras citywide. And this, so this is a funded and approved project already in the CIP. Next slide, please. This slide provides a list of city council referrals, which have not necessarily been prioritized, but are items that we are tracking. And pending further analysis, discussion, or possible prioritization in the future may or may not be CIP related. So we wanted to make sure to include them on this slide so that if mayor and city council choose to discuss them or ask questions about them tonight, we wanted to have them up on here. One item that hasn't been discussed at the council is the Cesar Chavez Community Garden. We wanted to put this on here because in April, possibly a recommendation from the Recreation Commission will be coming forward to the mayor and city council on policy and procedure changes to our community garden program. And as part of that, there may be a desire to make the plots smaller at the community garden to allow more gardeners. That is not we have not performed any cost estimates for that work yet. It has not been discussed at the city council meeting, but it likely will be discussed in April. And so we wanted to just make you aware of it right now because we're having the CIP budget study session today. Next slide, please. In conclusion, we have 48 projects funded in fiscal year 2023-24 for a value of $30.58 million. And in the 5-year CIP is valued at $243 million. It's important to continue to remind myself and others that this funding, that 243, we still have 57 million of that where we need to identify funding for, and as we move forward in the out years of the CIP. And there are 21 new projects added to the CIP. Next slide, please. CIP, this is a calendar of next steps. Today, February 28th, we're presenting the document to you. On March 6th, there'll be a presentation to the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Commission. On March 21st will be the Prop 218 water wastewater rate increase public hearing. And as mentioned before, it will be really important to have a good discussion at that meeting, because if we do not approve those rates, our infrastructure backlog will significantly increase in the city due to a lack of means to pay for a lot of the infrastructure repairs that are going to be needed in our sewer system. And then on March 22nd, the Planning Commission will review for the general plan conformance. On April 18th, the council will consider for the adoption of the 5-year CIP and a public hearing and budget adoption on June 26th. June 6th. Some items that we would thank you. Some items we definitely would like feedback on today. One is council feedback on any of the proposed projects or anything else we presented tonight. And we specifically for the council priorities, there's a recommendation to potentially allocate $200,000 for pickleball and $200,000 for the police substation feasibility analysis. And we would like any feedback from the mayor and city council on that question tonight. Next slide, please. And this is a summary of the recommendation to receive presentation on the proposed 5-year 2024-2028 capital improvement program and projects to be funded through the American Rescue Plan Act, and provide feedback to staff and find a CEQA exemption. So that concludes our presentation to you tonight. And obviously open to any questions or discussion that you would like to have.
Thank you for that presentation. Can you go back to page 53, because I wanted to make a clarification on that. And this was regarding the larger message sign at City Hall. And that was not the intent. It was at the library, so I don't know where the miscommunication came in.
Okay.
But that was, you notice in the library, in the frontage, there's a little, not billboard, not billboard, but it's really small. That's the one that
Oh, okay.
that's the one that I had wanted to make larger, so not the one at City Hall.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. We'll look into that.
And then on page 54, did I not see the consulate office on there? 53, is it 53?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I did.
Yes,
I didn't
yes.
hear anything. Okay. All right, that's it, thank you. So we're going to move on to public comment. And then after that, we'll go to the consulate for discussion. So anyone from the public? No, we're on. Any, no. Okay, so now it's the city council. So any of my colleagues would like any comments, take any comments on the agenda? Silent. And Councilman Ben?
Yes, thank you, Michael, for the very in-depth presentation. I have a couple of questions. To start off with pickleball, would that be a totally new project, or is that something that we convert like an existing piece of a park or a tennis to that?
Thank you for that question, council member. With the $200,000 budget, it would be the conversion. So we would have to find an existing tennis facility that we would convert to pickleball by resurfacing and putting in permanent nets.
And have you narrowed down the list of potential locations?
Yeah, we want to be, I'll defer to Renee, Director Lorenzen for that. She's probably provide a better response than I would on that.
Thank you. Renee Lorenzen, Director of Recreation and Community Services. So good question, council members. So we currently have the pilot program and what is pictured here, which is the Hall Park tennis courts. So we are currently studying the use of pickleball and tennis at this site specifically. We also have 2 courts at Gill as well that we're monitoring, indoor courts at the sports center, and have recently moved over to Bob Brown as there's some lines that are painted there. So we are keeping our eye on the areas that we're currently programmed at. So if the council were interested in funding this project and creating a permanent site, we would do community work out to these locations to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to speak to both the pickleball clientele as well as tennis before we make any final decisions on the location.
How challenging was that process for the pilot program?
Challenging? I don't think it was challenging. Personally, I enjoy the community process, but we were able to put out signs at the locations, the physical locations. We had a relationship with pickleball players. We also had relationships with tennis players at both the Hall Park and the Gill Park. So we reached out to all of them and gave several weeks notice for a community meeting, and then utilized a facilitator to lead that meeting to get feedback, and have done so throughout the last let's say 6 or 7 months doing surveys out to the sites to continue to get that feedback. So for the city would permanently change an outdoor facility, want to have one more meeting or maybe two, just to make sure we're having another last conversation about a permanent change.
Sure.
Yeah.
I want to ask about, I guess, the physical limitations, if you will, of the scope. Is it one of those things where, you know, you can reverse if needed, or is it permanent? You know, I guess an example would be like if you flip if you used a chessboard and play checkers with it, you know, it's interchangeable. Is that, you know, is there any flexibility here?
So I think Hall Park is a great example. There's both tennis court lines and pickleball lines out of those courts right now. And so you could call half the courts multi-use. The challenge is the netting systems. So whichever is going to be the more dominant sport, you would have the permanent nets for that sport.
Yeah.
And then you would have the temporary nets for the secondary sport, if you will. So it's not impossible to have both sports out there. However, the costs and how many courts we could provide by having to be permanently multi-sport would require another cost analysis than what you received tonight.
I see. And have you, I know you've gotten feedback from, you know, the different, the respective enthusiasts. But how are the neighbors response to it? Because a common feedback that I often hear is the noise.
We have not received any complaints from the neighbors at Hall Park. Part of the data that we're collecting are also decibel readings from around the courts themselves. So we've measured it during times where it's high pickleball usage to see what that decibel level is versus when there's recess at Kirtner School, when you've got several hundred children outside, as well as soccer that's played at those fields, which is very popular. And so we've had some instances where wind gusts or cars driving by have been louder than the pickleball. So we haven't had any major complaints at that site. There may have been some concerns at the Gill Park earlier last year, the year before. We haven't heard any since. Recreation has not.
Now, is this a sport that can only be played outdoors?
No, it can be played inside. They play inside at the sports center in our gym. We do 6 temporary courts and set those up a couple of times a week for them as well, for the community.
Thank you. Wow, you know a lot about pickleball.
So hi. Yes, thank you for your questions.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's very insightful. I'll let the rest of the council weigh in, you know, before going forward with any decisions on the pickleball matter. But yeah, I'll circle back to you myself later on. Further.
Thank you, Councilmember Fan. So I wanted to piggyback on your comments, Councilmember. I was also thinking on the lines of some type of being able to do a multi-use. So is there any way that staff can research? Because it seems to me that it would be more cost effective if we can convert and this, you know, instead of renovating the whole court from tennis to pickleball. It seems to me that it would be more cost effective if we could do a multi-use, as Councilmember Fan had alluded to. I think we need to look into being innovative. How can we use that court for two sports. So if you can go back, in my opinion, I think you could, you could be more, do more due diligence and really look to see how we can do that. Because I think that would be really beneficial. We don't have to tear anything down, we could just use it for two sports. So those are just my thoughts on that. Anybody else, any comments on anything else? Okay, Vice Mayor Chua.
Thank you both for your comments. Actually, we're actually doing dual purpose on Gill Park. Hall Park. And they can use it, half of it they can use for pickleball and the other half for tennis. And we're also doing it at the Milpitas Sports Center. Because we can use the courts they can use it for badminton, pickleball, basketball, volleyball, and we're doing that. We're doing that right now. And the one thing good about the pilot project over at Hall Park is we were able, the tennis players and the pickleball players were able to coexist harmoniously, which we didn't see at Brown Park. Brown Park, they didn't like the pickleballers there. So it depends on where we have, where the location that we choose. And also it depends on the neighborhood and that's the trust, I think, of the objective of this going into the 200,000 to find a place where everybody's sort of kind of happy. So that's my input. Thank you. Oops. Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Lynn.
Thank you, Mayor. Ouch. Sorry.
Yes.
I kicked. It's already done. Thank you. I have a question, not on the pickleball, but on one of the 47 projects. If someone can explain to me what is the financial system enterprise resource planning is? That's $1.85 million. I think Lauren is going to.
I think, what, didn't we supposed to give public comment first and then? Okay.
Good evening, Council. So the ERP system is to replace our current financial system called Cayenta. And the current financial system is over 26 years old. And so we need to modernize it so we could enable us to manage our finances and streamline our operation. So.
Okay, and it's costing 1.85.
That's the fiscal 23-24 portion. The aggregate cost for the project is modestly 3.5 million, and it could be more. We have to do an assessment of our needs. We have to do an RFP and then go through the selection process. So there's 3 tiers for such a system, and we'll have to see what's the best fit in terms of our long-term investment.
And the $450,000 for city attorney office, what are we doing there?
That is for.
Yes.
So the 450,000 is to actually build offices for the city attorney, assistant city attorney, and legal assistant. And the city attorney might want to add more to that, but it's to actually build. At this point, there is no additional office to accommodate the assistant city attorney. And the legal assistant also sits separate from where the city attorney is located. So this would be on the 3rd floor of City Hall and would require building of hardwood construction, relocation of lights, HVAC, all of that.
We're on 3rd floor because we have conference room, we have city attorney, and then the council is in the mayor.
Right, so we would be converting existing cubicle spaces along the east wall into office.
I see. Okay.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thanks, Mayor.
Vice Mayor, sure.
Thank you, Mayor. And piggybacking on Councilmember Lynn's question on financial systems. What modules are you thinking of? What modules are we getting? Or thinking of getting?
Right now, we're doing an assessment, but the idea is to replace the full financial system.
Are we
Because
talking about GL, AP, AR?
general ledger, accounts payable, you know all your modules. All right, so let's go down the list. General ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable,
Fixed
procurement, fixed assets, grant management, project management, the payroll system itself, and fiscal services. What we're not certain about is utility billing. We understand utility billing in Kayenta is competitive. We'll see as we stack up the functionality. And certainly in concert with the HRIS system. That's a very important integration because we want to ensure that our labor management and workforce management will integrate with our new system.
Okay, I remember when the first ARPA funds came in and staff made a recommendation before the council decided. And there was a line item there of 4.2, I think, around, and that was the financial system. And instead of going to the financial system, we allocated that to the parks, to the rehabilitation of 12, 13 parks at that time. The reason why I recommended, which the council approved, $1 million for the HRIS, because I know we don't have an existing one. That's why I went with the HRIS. And I recommended, just the council approved $100,000 for the financial systems for feasibility study. There's a reasoning for that, why I did that. The one reason is I wanted to get a feel for everybody for implementing a new system, a smaller module, which is the HRIS. Because we will learn from implementing the HRIS, what it takes to implement a system, even on a smaller scale. Implementing a financial system is humongous. It's not an easy task. It will take years. It will take resources from your current staff and plus consultants. So my thinking is, let's learn from the HRIS implementation and piggyback on that knowledge and then tackle on a bigger financial system. Modularize it in terms of implementation. Go with GL, go with AR, AP, then all the modules. What I would caution on the HRIS is to make sure when you select the module, the application, it's compatible. It's easily connected to whatever financial systems you're thinking. So that would be part of the RFP. Make sure it's compatible with the financial systems. So that's where I'm coming from in terms of financial systems. Thank you, Mayor.
And did you want me to respond? I do. So to just give the council some context, I have a lot of ERP experience. In 2000, I worked in the private sector for a startup and I helped lead the implementation of Oracle, full ERP, financials, operations, inventory, Salesforce. In Marina, I also implemented an ERP system there, financial and HRIS. It is really important for that integration because our vision is not an accounting system. It's a resource planning system for the whole operations.
Right.
So the digitization, the modernization of process, the integration with CalPERS, that's the vision. So yes, we can do our HRIS first. There will be a lot of risk because we don't really know what the future ERP financial system will be. The risk is we're going to be, we have a great HRIS, but if it doesn't integrate with the new payroll, If it doesn't integrate with the new ERP system, we then have an unintegrated system. And we have that pervasive problem. So the vision is to have one system between finance and HR that's going to work really well. In order to do that, it is our advice and our recommendation to procure them concurrently.
I would go with that because they have SAS now. SAS, and you can modularize it using SAS. I mean, you can, you know, software for a service. I mean,
Right.
why is it?
Yeah,
You understand what I'm
I
saying?
do.
So that's where I'm
That's
going.
the vision of this as well, is we are going to recommend a SaaS agreement. It's not going to be an on-prem license.
Right, I would go, my personal opinion, I'm only one vote. I would go with HRIS first. That doesn't mean we're gonna forget about it, but for this year, this is not the right time to do it. For big project like that, I know I've gone through it, and I know how big that is. I would go with HRIS first and look at financial systems maybe next year. I'm sorry, Lauren.
No, you don't have to apologize. I just want to make sure we understand the challenges and the opportunities with these different projects. HRIS without the payroll module will not be effective. The payroll module currently sits within the financial system. If we redesign and take apart the payroll module to make HRIS effective, we are inherently buying one key component of the financial system. It will require us to revamp our whole general ledger for our new payroll system to work properly. So they really are joined at the hip. As much as we don't want them to be, they inherently are. If we don't do payroll with HRIS, then we're going to have a labor management system that doesn't integrate well with timesheet, and then therefore doesn't integrate well with the rest of finance. Does that make sense?
I understand.
So there are pros and cons.
Right, that's the challenge, how solid your RFP is. Is if you can define your specifications well, then that would be less cumbersome when you do your financial systems. I wish I could say yes, I thought about it really hard, but I just don't wanna tackle that big. I know how big that project is. I want to get the experience from HRIS, learn from it, and then go with the big project.
Yeah, as
Thank
long
you.
as we understand the
Yeah, we
drawback.
do. We do. Thank you. Thanks, Lauren.
Would you like, is that okay? Liz Brown, Liz Brown, Human Resources, Interim Human Resources Director. So just to add to what Lauren had just said, and understanding actually what you're recommending, Vice Mayor Chua, I also have been a lead on ERPs. And depending on what our end goal is, that's the problem. So if we knew we were going in with an independent HRIS, this would make perfect sense. But we are so reliant on the finance side that we would like to be able to merge the two. So to start with an HRIS without knowing what system we would be going with an ERP, it would be challenging for us to select. You know what I mean? It's they really are just.
So my answer to that is narrow your selection companies in which they have a full financial systems. Don't take independent standalone HRIS. Get the ones with financial systems, and then that would limit that to. I know you're gonna have to get the feedback from finance anyway, so that would be part of it. That would be the challenge. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Chua. It's really great to have you here on the council since she has that expertise, that background, and what most of us don't. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. I'm surrounded with great people here, so thank you both very much.
Any other council members have any other comments on the presentation? Councilmember Baudillo.
It's not to digest. Let me start with what has been started with regards to the pickleball. I'm fine with that, as long as anything for the community and for the people. That's why we're here. With regards to the city attorney's office, I can volunteer my office to say 450,000. I'm serious. Consider that, and I can work online and just visit the city hall. That's my thoughts on that. And overall of the presentation, what's lacking that I saw is the return of the benefit to the community. I've seen graphs that has less return of our CIPs for the benefit of the community. We look at, I'm not saying that we don't need it. I'm just saying that I'm seeing the lack of return to the community. I see the roof, I see the HVAC, I see everything that there is to improve the facility, but there's less to benefit the community. And here's one more. Look at how much is that? 55 million, you said. If right, and it elevates to what, 100 million if we do not approve the sewer increase in March. So that's another takeaway from the community. We're gonna put higher bills on them and we're giving them less on our budget. There's nothing wrong with the presentation. It's just probably priority. With regards to the human resources and the finance, right? I keep on hearing vision. I keep on hearing later on there's going to be an integration. That's great, right? But do we need it now? Is it one of the priorities that we need to budget 1.8 million this year? Removing some funds that needs to be available to the community. I'm community driven. Can anyone put up the graph where there's an unfunded? It is a circle graphs. The unfunded community.
$42.
I think so, yeah. That one. Right. So look at that. See, until our projection in 2028, those are community-based benefits that we don't have sufficient funding. And it's like threatening, hey, if you don't pay more on your sewage, it's gonna be more and funding of 107.6 million. How would that be? Right, we're not giving them those projects, and we're gonna hit them with utility increases this year.
Councilmember, I'll start the question and see if anybody else want to add to it. So we don't, on this chart, we don't have what we're implying by that asterisk at the bottom is that if we didn't increase the rates, the additional, as you mentioned, it would be increased from 57 to 107 million. And we would we'd be adding some numbers in that sewer and water row. So those numbers aren't shown on here. There would be some additional numbers in the sewer and water row that would make up that additional 50 million. Since we're assuming it would be funded through the rates, we didn't include it on here as unfunded.
All right. Does anybody know how much is the extra 50 million would cause as part of the increase in sewer and water? This is going to hit in March, right? If we approve it.
Correct. And if I could ask for some clarification, are you asking what the additional rate increases would be?
Should we, okay, right.
we already discussed that we studied prior. What I'm saying is, with that increases, it seems that it's about 50 million.
Correct, yeah, there's about $50 million we're assuming we would get out of those rate increases.
Right, and despite the 50 million, we're still having unfunded necessary projects for the community.
Correct.
So where's the logic of that?
So that,
I think, Councilmember Barbadia, we're looking at, different funding sources, right? So the sewer and water rates only can pay for sewer and water infrastructure, right? And so that's what, Matt was talking about. The community projects, which, community parks, streets, they have different funding sources. A lot of it comes from the general fund. And then some of those areas, as we talked about, like parks and streets, they could have other funding sources, such as the gas tax for streets or for parks, depending on where they are, we could have impact fees. But the bottom line is we do not have enough dedicated funding sources coming for all of our needs, which is why we have to continue to look at, the funding mechanisms for all of those. Besides the utilities, because utilities should be standalone, they should be paying for themselves, right? If the other infrastructure elements that we have to look at either, obviously there's always grants, there's general fund dollars. And then really looking at, as I talked about earlier, we are probably gonna have to look for the scale of the need to look at some other funding mechanisms like taxes, bonds, etc. But we're not there yet.
Right. Well, I wish I could say that to the people and explain it the way that explain it and they understand it. When you're in the community, all you hear is there's an increase in my bill, and you can't digest this segregation of where they go. I can't tell them, oh, it's utilities, that's for our utility, right? So that's my thing. A 50 million increase should we not hit them with an increase in water rates and sewer rates in March 2023. That's my problem. So I think that the solution, I'm not as expert as the honorable directors around me, right, is priority. Priority in a sense that we balance it on what we have. The projections that we have in 5 years, we have a, I remember during our budget study, we do have a projection of, I think, 129 million, but a portion of that is still uncertain with regards to the funding. And what we're doing right now with expenses and allocations is we're spending not only the 129 million, but over it. And now it's creating additional problem with funding. If you get my point, so our current budget have problems with funding. With regards to our CIP right now, there will still be, there's already a problem of that 57 million that's an unfunded project. So on top of that, we have a projected 400 something million in 5 years. When what's the increase of our yearly budget if we start at 129? How can we reconcile that? In 5 years, you said CIP, everything funded. Hopefully we can find out sources. We'll spend 453 million. But our budget is just like 129 million per fiscal year.
You're correct, Councilmember Barbadia, which is why we're saying we will need to look at some point at other funding mechanisms like a general obligation bond, which goes over 30 years, right? I mean, that's a very common way of financing assets that are over the long term. And it's also, it creates generational equity too, right? Because you don't just have people now paying for it, but people over 30 years paying for that. So those are kind of things we will need to look at. At this time, I think we're focused on, we've had some of these master plans approved, right? The utility ones, the parks ones. We're looking to see how we can use, whether it's our rate, the rates coming in, the rate revenues, Or again, with the two specific plan areas, the impact fees provide a great source of funding for streets and parks. So we're trying to look at how we can maximize that. We continue to seek federal, state and regional grant dollars. But it is a big need and we're not gonna solve it just with our general fund dollars. And I think we all recognize that. We're not quite ready to talk about other funding mechanisms right now. Which is why we're kind of presenting to you. I think it's important for all of us to be aware of the needs. But at the same time, we're planning for all the critical projects coming up.
Right. I think you're right. While we look for grants, as you said, you're not even talking about it because we don't know yet where they're gonna come from. Then let's look at what we're funding the next 5 years with a balance to giving back to the community. That's my point. And another observation I have, if we look at the prior completed projects being funded, most of them are plans, like the bicycle plan, like this plan. Where is the implementation? So we're stuck with the plan. Like the bike, I forgot what the bike trail. We have outlaid everything, but what's the follow-up? Don't we want the kids to go bike around? Do we want the employees of the city to go bike? We have the plan and then we stop. What's next? Why not that? Instead of the other things that we believe that we need now.
So on the bike one, I mean, again, it's a small start, but we did get $1 million from the state to start with some of those improvements, right? So again, we scrounge from everywhere to try and get money, but the master planning was really important on the utility ones because we haven't had master plans done for the longest time. So I think having plans in place, it also helps us get grant funding, right? Once we have plans approved, we're able to be more competitive. We can articulate which projects are critical and why they're important to the community, and we're able to get grant funding.
All right, wouldn't we allocate some funds to look at that? Let's say, I'll go back to the bike. I like biking. Maybe with the plans, why we not allocate to park the recreation department? Hey, here's a map of the bike routes in Milpitas. We will give you an incentive, something like that, just to follow up on a plan that's been funded and then completed. I understand master plans. Yes, they're there as a plan. But let me ask you presume that you're not asset, right? Some master plans that we had before, right? I don't know how when was it, but the question is, we studied and we redrafted the plan. What's in between? So let's say, I forgot which plans we have. What happens if we haven't done anything in 5 years because we haven't allocated any CIP funds for it? And then again, either by the state or by whoever authority needs us to redraw the plan again. Right, like the PASP. When I was here years ago, it's just the PASP. Now it's being integrated with the Milpitas Metro Plan. Now it's being integrated to cater for improvements. That was a good plan before, and I don't know what transpired to implement that plan until we have these improvements and integrations of the plans in the task area.
So, and I'll let maybe Steve Chan and Ned Thomas also add to this, but the Metro Plan does expand the area of the task. We actually did complete a lot of infrastructure projects, so it's not like it just stayed still. We did complete infrastructure projects, and I think what the next step kind of allows us to really, the expansion of the innovation district, right? So we're hoping that's, attracts jobs, kind of fosters that economic vitality there. And I will turn it over to Ned to talk about sort of the key elements, and then also Steve Chan to talk about some of the infrastructure improvements that have been completed.
Thank you, Assistant City Manager. Ned Thomas, the planning director. For the metro plan, I think the very basic, the important thing to remember, the genesis of that plan was really the CEQA document. So the original transit area specific plan included an EIR that provided for around 7,100 residential units. And we built over the 10 years, the city, the development community built all of those units. So there was no more capacity left within the CEQA document to build any more units without doing further CEQA analysis on a project by project basis. So that was really the genesis of updating that plan, was to unlock the rest of the potential in that area for further development over the next 20-25 years. And then while we were doing that, we decided to take a little bit broader look at it. The general plan had called for the establishment of an innovation district. So we looked at where would the boundaries of that be? What would that look like? Planning, collaborating with economic development on that component of the plan. I think it turned out very nicely. It's very different than what we started, our initial thinking. So there was some very creative thinking there. And then we looked at the neighborhoods that weren't yet completed, primarily the Tango neighborhood or the Ter Sango Port. And there had been some changes in the market and the way that things were built there. So we modified the plan a bit in that area to provide some additional capacity. And then the last important part is the Great Mall site. Of course, the original transit area plan didn't really call for any changes on the Great Mall site because 12 years ago, things were going fine at the Great Mall. But as we worked with and talked with the property owner, Simon Development, discovered that they have an interest in the next 20 years in evolution of that site with additional housing, as well as mixed use development, office, and a portion of it would also become part of the innovation district. So there were a lot of different parts, but again, when you come right down to it, nuts and bolts was that we needed more environmental capacity within the environmental document to have additional development in that area.
Right. Yeah, maybe what's missing, as I said, I forget that I asked it. Because as laymanly as I am, let's say there's a plan, and yes, there's going to be adjustments in the next few years. But what I was expecting is, with the plan, there is an implementation, not just reacting what's going on in the area, but it's the principle that I am trying to ask about that. Another one is, I don't know who's ordering me in the city, but I remember between 2014 to 18, I'm talking about the AV improvement and council chambers. Right. At that time, we were hosting like a 2 million improvement of something. Do you remember what was that? Again, this is just in memory.
I don't think in that time frame we made improvements to the.
Renee, please say no, please. No, yeah, because I created something with chambers, and everybody was saying, oh, it's 2 million, and this is state of the art. I just want to find out what was that, and what's this request for 800,000 improving the chambers.
Thank you, Council Member Daniel Nam, IT Director. At the time, we didn't have significant improvement at the council chamber, so the current system that's in there right now is 11 years old. So
something happened in 14 to 18. I'm sure of that. It's either the TV behind us or it is something.
I'm not sure at the time. As far as we know, the current system is 11 to 12 years old right now. So what we might have done is replacing some of the failed equipment potentially. And right around that time, we also did a network upgrade as well. So potentially maybe that's what you're remembering, that's some of the improvements we made there. So the council chamber improvement that we're requesting this time, in June of 2022, in council meeting, the council approved the $200,000 for the design and assessment of this project. And we are going through that right now, but we're expecting roughly about $800,000 for the actual project implementation. This includes purchasing all of the new hardware, new displays, and so on. We think it's a pretty critical project because besides the obsolete hardware, they are frequently failing. We've had power issues, video switching system, which is a critical component of our council meeting support. We had to go and make an emergency purchase to get a temporary solution. So that's how we are operating right now. I think the project implementation is expected to complete in July recess time, so in 2024. But as far as that timeline, we didn't have major AV system upgrade, as I can tell.
Well, I'll defer to your expertise on that, is what I'm saying, and maybe half of it, let's just repave the road, something like that, right? I don't know if, if it affects, council meeting, yeah, I've seen that. But, council meetings are just like twice a month, right? And, all I'm saying is the system really failing? We have to have, them replaced.
Yes, Councilor, so we have had several failures already. We thought this is a very important project because we are supporting the hybrid meeting, so the communities can actually participate in the council meetings. And we've had at least 2 failures within the 30 minutes of starting a council meeting. So we have to find a workaround very quickly. They are failing too often. And because of the implementation, how long it takes to actually configure, test, and install all the equipment, it takes roughly about a month for vendors to complete that. And that leaves us the recess time. So as soon as the second meeting of the June of 2024, we will have all of our systems configured and tested, and it'll take roughly about a month to take the old system out and put new systems in and test everything before the August 1st meeting. So we're shooting for that timeline. It is quite critical.
All right, can we look, I'm just curiosity now, right? What we did last night, that's that, but I'm okay, I'll take your advisement that, it should be done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it is better, we'll have a better system delivering, communications and services to the community. I'm okay with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Romero. Anyone else that received? Mayor Chua? Anybody else have? Councilmember Bath.
And use the back.
Okay, Vice Mayor. There you go. Can we go back to slide that shows the different parts, the red one, the blue?
The one with the map on it.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes. 18. Okay, so the original one was 12, the ARPA. The Senate was the first time that got this jump started, I remember. I was invited to look at how. So can you just briefly summarize so everybody understands your reaction on the ARPA funding?
Sure, I'll start briefly. We've split it up into 2 projects. One went out to bid already, and the results were in front of the mayor and city council late last year, December, and so that project is Christian can provide a lot more. Director Dorenza can provide a lot more detail. But that project is gonna start construction in the near future, finalizing the contract with the contractor right now. And then the second project, which is a larger group of projects, is just starting the design process right now. And so I'll ask Director Dorenza if you want to add any detail to the project you're working on.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, we are currently the contract with J&G Builders. Began some of their initial work at Pinewood Park yesterday, believe it or not, in the rain. And, they would follow that up with, Sunny Hills Augustine would be the second part. And, Sunny Hill is in receipt of a state parks grant and $224,000. It has to be, so it's under the gun to complete that project by the end of the fiscal year. The original proposal included 7 parts and came in at about $872,000. So we had some money left over, and we are doing a change order for two of the 4 ad alternates, Park Metro East and Central, I believe. And so there leaves 2 more that don't have sufficient funding. The rest of the funds, the 97,000 are applied to Selwyn Park for the second phase of the short-term improvements. The improvements at Selwyn Park totaled $128,000. So we should have enough for all of those short-term improvements. The 7 parks are slated to be completed by the end of August, early September, at which point we will continue with the 2 ad alternates.
Tristan, well, what happened to the red ones, the 10, 11, 12, 13? What's the status on those?
I'll go ahead and speak to that. Thank you. So as part of the engineering joint effort project on our end, we're actually doing a deeper design for the 4 vertical parks and also the 8 core parks, which is off to the right. So that requires more in-depth design that we're currently just started here in January and hope to be finished by the fall to go out to bid next year, early winter. The short-term improvements for these 12 parks require a little bit more design. We need to better understand the constraints and the conditions so that we can go out to bid appropriately so that we don't go over budget, because we have a very constrained budget here. We want to be sure that we're appropriating the funds accordingly to the biggest need of those 12 parks.
This started in 2021 and now it's 2023. What happened in between?
Well, we were, due to our current schedules, such as the fire station, McCown's Park, Aviso Adobe, those parts were more a priority at that time. Now, as we're finishing and moving forward with our workload, this was a priority to get it started this year.
I thought we added some consultants to be project managers of this part we have. If I remember correctly.
Vice Mayor Chua, we added a couple of positions, but again, we've been struggling with kind of attraction and retention with engineers, as have been all cities around us. These, I believe, were starting in 22-23. That's when we talked about adding the positions for this fiscal year. The parks were also supposed to start in 22-23 current fiscal year, which is what Michael just talked about. So it took a while to, get a consultant on board, design consultant, and start with these parks, which is what we've done now. But we are struggling. I mean, I think you've heard that before from us. We are struggling with retaining staff as there's many opportunities and a limited engineers.
So did we finish anything last year, 23? Did we address any of these 20 parts in completion? So this is why I asked earlier this week to give me a status, so I don't have to ask these questions today, and I didn't get it. So I would ask again before we go to the next CIP meeting. Please give us a status on where we are right now. If you are in the design phase, if you're in the specification phase, if you are in the contract or whatever, looking for contractors, those I need to know, because the residents are asking, is it, you have the funds, you said you have the funds, you said it's part of the project, and we're not seeing anything. So that's the frustration here.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor. So we will do that, oh, sorry. We will do that for the 20 parks that are funded by ARPA. We'll provide a status on each of the parks, just in summary.
And we send it to all the council members, so when they're asked, they know what to answer.
Yes.
Okay, my next one, sorry. My next one is the slide that shows the different parks and there is you needing some funds. And $8 million. It's the
43.
this one. Okay, that one. So tell me again what this means, please.
Sure, thank you. So overall, of 36 parks in Milpitas, 24 in the master plan were that recognizes being in good or fair condition, and 12 in poor to critical condition. And as we look through the master plan, every park has a list of near-term, high-priority repairs identified in the master plan, and then longer-term repairs identified in the master plan. And so to complete all those near-term repairs for the park system, some are high priority safety related, some are just high priority because the infrastructure is deteriorating, but it's not in enough unsafe condition. But to complete all those near-term repairs, high priority repairs, is a total $8 million cost estimated in the master planning effort. So far through ARPA, we've identified 4.4 million of that. And we have all the items that have identified in the parks that are safety improvements have been included in that $4.4 million. And so we still hope through grants, future budget cycles, or savings that we can find in other areas that we can continue to allocate funding towards the parks to complete all that entire $8 million of high priority improvements in the near future.
Okay. I'll give the rest of the time to the council. The rest of the council, if they want to. Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else? I think that anyone wanted to speak up. So, as we know, this is just to give a direction to the council, it's not to approve it. But I did agree with Councilmember Barbadillo that I didn't see too much going to the community. Seems like that should have been first, and then the other items, for example, you mentioned City Hall needed some roof repair. So I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but it just seems to me that I would like to go over some of these line items, especially council referrals. Does anyone have any thought on this? Because I think for me, as Councilor Barbadillo had mentioned, the community has to see the fruits. And I think we need to focus on more of the fruits instead of the things that are in the background. For example, I would love to see a police substation, but you're saying that there's no funding for that. So I'd like to go down the line on this. And this is for the council referral, this is for the lifted gates.
Yes, that's an endeavor.
45. Or 45. Okay.
Okay, so for example, the first one is the teen center. And so
I'm sorry.
oh, I'm sorry, the pickleball project, go over that one. And this one is an item approved by the council. So this one is to convert an existing tennis facility to permanent court. Spending needed up to 200,000. But we had just discussed about possibly making it a multi-use, and we said it is
already doing that.
Convertible. So I'm not clear what why the 200,000, so can you expand on that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and City Council. So as part of the pilot program, the council had asked us to, on a short-term basis, conduct the pilot, and then at the conclusion of the pilot and all the data collection, present long-term solutions to the city council for pickleball in Milpitas. And that would equate into a more permanent location for them to play. So what I'm hearing, Mayor, is potentially coming back to the city council on permanent facilities, but potentially permanent / multi-use.
Correct.
Okay.
That's good. Okay, next one, police substation. And that one was discussed on 12/7/22. The next steps is potential funding of more 200K. This is for a feasibility study. So I'd like to take a consensus if we want to move forward with this or not.
Since it's for public safety, I would support it.
So, and then anyone else?
Yeah, so this is something that I would like to ask PD about. Because I've had multiple conversations with representatives from the department. And I'm not quite sure if it is actually a key departmental priority. I know that council has been very supportive of this substation, but I think the bigger point is that we are all supportive of public safety and public safety priorities. So if a substation doesn't necessarily align with the immediate goals and needs of the police department, I would prefer that we work more towards the immediate needs. So I do want to focus on our existing infrastructure because our current status of the police station, it's deteriorating. And that actually affects the folks who are working there right now. So if we can work on improvements to our current facility, I want to be supportive of the folks who are here right now and make us more competitive in terms of recruitment and focus on retention. And all of these things have been a huge PD issue. The fact of the matter is it's difficult to recruit in this industry. And, you know, if we create a substation, that entails additional staffing to staff that substation, staffing capacity that we don't currently have because we're trying to fill positions and we're accounting for future retirements and whatnot. So at the end of the day, for that, perhaps that is a good long-term goal. But I'm not sure that it is in the best interest of PD, and I would love to you know hear more from staff if I'm off here. And then the other thing I think that we can sort of amend that works, that I hope works for everyone, is that you know we can still pursue a feasibility study, but I don't think we need to narrow it down to specifically a substation. Perhaps there are other infrastructure needs. Perhaps it makes more sense for us to build something else, another facility, improve on existing facilities. That's one. And then the other thing is, it doesn't necessarily need to be city owned either. I'd like to expand that to, other publicly owned parcels. We can work with outside government agencies such as the county, the school district, really any public agency that has, property. And we know it exists, but at the end of the day, city property is scarce. We'd love to get more, but it really is scarce. That's not to say that this feasibility study would exclude city property, but I think you get where I'm going at.
Thank you. So, Vice Mayor Chua?
I see where Councilmember Fan is going, and I think it's in the same path as this substation. I think if we widen the scope of this, instead of just saying substation, if we widen the scope and say looking at the current, situational analysis of what we have right now and what can we improve in terms of public safety, not just focusing on substation. Substation will come if the analysis say we do need substation for public safety. It's just widening the scope of this feasibility study, like partnering with school and other parks, developing the park and all that. And I think that will work. And I think that's better approach to feasibility studies, looking at everything.
Right.
That's my thought. Thank you.
Feasibility study that encompasses looking at the whole, panorama view of everything, the land that we have. And then he's talking to the chief. And I have had conversations with the chief, and yes, there is a need to place, we have a lot of vehicles. He was telling me that we have a lot of vehicles that are impounded and there's no room to put the cars. So, and those are used for evidence when you're in there, when they go to court and so forth. So, I don't know which officers you've been speaking to, but there has been, I have been speaking to the chief and to staff management, and there is a need. But so, as Vice Mayor mentioned, this is for a feasibility study. That's all it's asking for. And I'm for a feasibility study. So I want to get a consensus about from the council members if they want this feasibility study.
Can I comment? Please.
Councilmember Ban, Barbara Dale,
Yeah.
sorry.
So, I've heard both, good, council members. What I didn't hear is the input from the community. What really wants, with all due respect, Councilman Pan, what the requirements will be staffing. And, as council member, Vice Mayor Chua says, it's about, the needs and just widen, the feasibility study, right? Look, that area, that proposed or potential is within the transit area, metro specific plan, and that side of town are the fights, right? So maybe, well, I agree with the feasibility study, widen it, and I do agree that it probably would affect staffing and the PD. But let's look at it. It's not just saying we don't need it now, But let's see if the growing community with all those plans that we have, all those improvements, maybe we need a substation, who knows, right? And if we don't, after spending our valuable dollars on a study, then we don't. So all we're saying is, with the growth, the projections that we have in the next 5 years, why not? Why not look at it? Right? So that's my thought on that, and I'm fine with this study.
So there is a consensus,
Sorry,
Brian.
Mayor, Council. I know that Chief Hernandez had to step away, but I believe he will be coming back shortly if you guys have questions for him.
Oh, great, okay, great. And,
Yes, I just wanted to add a little bit. So, in terms of the substation, there was a feasibility analysis done as part of TAP. So there is supposed to be something in the TAP area and there's actually funding for it. I think this specific item is really related to looking at these parcels to see if it would work there. And as Chief Seven mentioned, hopefully Chief Hernandez will be back soon, but we have had a lot of conversations about what could go here. And substation is one component only, so really looking at other needs, as the mayor talked about, kind of room for evidence storage, room for potentially even moving the EOC there, and we'd have to look at that because they run out of room for dispatch, and so that would allow, so there's a lot of things, public safety related, that could happen at this location, so that's why the feasibility analysis is very focused on this site. If we wanted to broaden that, that would be a different scope, so.
Yes, Mayor. I think that's where the direction is going, is to grow and make it wider scope. Who knows, they might recommend to have 2 satellite police stations. We have 4 fire stations.
Where's the fire station?
So why not more than 1? And considering where crimes are right now, I think just the presence of another station makes the residents feel better. I would feel better. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
I think you guys said it all.
Councilmember Ability. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to, so there's consensus for that. To the next one is the community garden, and that one, oh, sorry about that, teen center, sorry. So that one, so we do have a teen center right now, but from my understanding, it's not being utilized. It's being used for something else. What, I don't know why that changed, but this project will not be included in 2024. So Renee, do you have any thoughts on that?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, so in 2012, the teen center location that was at the sports center was closed due to the recession budget cuts. It was then, as programming came back, in general for this city, it was used as an overflow for fitness classes and sports center programs. It's also used for youth programs at the site, mainly during breaks and summer programs. So in 2018, teen center programs were opened here at the senior center starting at 4 o'clock. So there's a little bit of overlap between the teens and the seniors for about 30 minutes.
Okay, so Councilmember, Vice Mayor Chua, you're the one that brought this up. So what are your thoughts on this one?
I just, it was approved by the majority of the council last time we prioritized this. I would like to see this funded for the feasibility study. It's about time we bring back the teen center, whatever for it might be.
Is there a consensus for this?
Second.
Okay, so where is the consensus? Moving on to the community garden at the Sona and Adobe Avenue. So on this one, staff, when you do the survey, if you could just also ask if they want, what do they want there? Because I was, after thinking about it, I was thinking, well, maybe they don't want a community garden. Maybe they want a little park. I recall there used to be a basketball area there where, but that was the reason why they took it out. There's a little recreation area where, kids used to play basketball, but I guess the noise factor was why it was taken out and removed. But maybe they want a little park. So when you do your survey, ask them what would they like to see there. And I think that would be the way to go. Is there a consensus for that, everyone?
Oh,
Yeah.
it is then.
Councilmember Lynn?
I think Renee can speak to this and to also share with us the list of the people who wanted a spot at the garden. The wait list was really long.
Oh, this is
So this is the community.
this is not the
Garden.
community garden, this is the proposed for a community garden after the summer park.
Right, so you said that it may not be to the best of.
Yeah, so when they do their survey, they can ask if maybe they don't want, they might, whatever they want to put there, maybe they might want to put a park. Maybe they want, maybe they might want to have a park instead of a community garden at that site. But then we're not talking about the community garden, the Cesar Chavez community garden, we're talking about.
I understand. I understand. I just wanted Renee to share with us because we were there at the meeting and community members came and spoke. So, yeah.
Go ahead.
Sure, yeah, thank you, Councilmember, Leanne and City Council. So the,
I think your mic needs to be on.
all right, thank you. So, we do have a community garden program and, there's currently a wait list of over 100 people on that list right now. So what this request was, from what I understand from the last meeting, was we do have some potential open space here. The original thought as it was presented was for serving the surrounding community at this location if they're interested in a community garden. And what I'm hearing tonight, Mayor, is that when we do the survey out to this neighborhood to ask them about the interest in having a garden there, but if not the garden, then is there some other open space or recreational activity that they're interested in?
Right.
Right, so we can get feedback on both of those things.
Because they live there, so they would know. Okay, great. Is there a consensus for that? I think I heard yes.
Finance is beyond the 2020.
The 23. South Main Street, streetlights and utility undergrounding projects. Now, I had brought this one up because I really feel that, we're trying. Many consuls have tried to revitalize Main Street and no one has ever been able to do it. And then unfortunately, when we had the redevelopment agency, that was the ideal time to do this. But it's neither here or there now, and I think it's time that we should move forward to do the underground. I would like to at least see to put some price on there or some budget on this to at least get it going. And then, of course, when the time comes, we can, from the Main Street Gateway specific plan, which might take 3-4 years from now, I don't know. So, but at least we have something to make it, to drive it to move forward. So, any thoughts on this, any council members? Who else go ahead? Nick?
Thank you, Mayor, for that.
Oh, Mike.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and speak to that. This has been a project in the CIP for quite some time now. So we've been in discussions. We actually already work with PG&E to design the undergrounding. Due to budget shortfalls, project is on hold. Also, we need to acquire easements on private property would be the first step to get this project going. And that's roughly about, we did an assessment to get a price, probably it'll cost us about $600,000. But it will probably take 12 to 24 months, depending on negotiations with the private owners. The project itself is probably going to cost $6 million to underground the project. The utility section from Fleming to Fire Station 1, which is Curtis, I believe. We currently have Rule 20 credits or work prone credits with PG&E. That only takes us for $4.5 million dollars, but we still need to fund the remaining, which is roughly about $1.5 million. So the total project to underground that project will probably cost us about $2 million. But the first step, because this is a long process, would be start the acquisition of getting easements, so we can get in contract with PG&E for to start that project, underground it.
Okay, the other thing I noticed on here, you mentioned all the way to Great Mall Parkway, from Maryland to Great Mall Parkway. So my thought was just to go up to Maryland Street, the historic section of the Main Street. But you're saying that's what it would cost all the way from Maryland to Great Mall. So I was just thinking going from Maryland to Corning, which is about 3 blocks. But that's, was there a reason why you mentioned Maryland to Great Mall Parkway?
I'm not sure where Maryland is. So-
That's the total cost.
Oh,
I don't think we need from Maryland to Carmel is already done.
No,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
So let me continue on. So there's really 3 phases of this street light / utility project. Phase 1 was from Carlo to Corning. And that portion, the utilities are already underground. From Corning to Curtis, that portion, the utilities are still overhead. And then from Curtis to Great Mall, those utilities are underground. So we're only the only portion of Main Street to underground is from Corning to Curtis.
Oh, okay, so you're saying that right now it is from Maryland to, that it's something under, you already have the underground utilities there.
Yes, so as you see in the first phase, the red line, those utilities, which is Carlo to Corning, that section is underground. Phase 2, which is the green line, from Corning to Curtis, that section is overhead.
Well, and because the whole point was to revitalize Main Street and you're putting the lights. And I'm just wondering why I was told it wasn't, that's what needed to be done. Do you know anything about this, Ally?
I certainly trust her.
Okay.
First engineering.
So,
Mayor Montano, interim Steve Chen, interim city engineer. So for this particular project, it includes undergrounding as well as decorative streetlights for the section of Curtis to Great Mall Parkway. You were asking that. That section is already underground. It has traditional Cobra head roadway lighting. So those are not decorative lighting per the Midtown specific plan right now. Those decorative street light is on the red section shown right here, Carlos to Corning, as well as from Great Mall down to I think Able Street or thereabouts. So it's a filling in the gaps of the decorative lighting along South Main Street as well as undergrounding.
yeah, that was the whole point to, for the holidays, we can put some decorative holiday lights, but as I was told that we don't have that underground electrical underground wiring. So, but you're saying we do, so any thoughts from my colleagues on this? Yeah, well, the thing is,
So,
let's just.
so like
anybody
that.
else, anything from staff?
I like that.
Ned, did you have something to say?
I'll go real quick next. So
Okay, Michael.
to clarify on the section between Curtis and, I'm sorry, Carlo and Curtis, those are Cobra heads, but they're owned by PG&E. So I don't think the city currently has, we need to look into it. I'm not quite sure, a electrical source that can provide street lighting. We'll look into that a little bit more further, but I just wanted to let you guys know that that is PG&E owned streetlights. How it got there, I don't know.
Okay. Find out.
Yeah.
To go do a study.
So-
Just a couple of quick things for context. So in April, we're hoping to come to you with a presentation on, or an update on Midtown, or the other one, the Gateway plan. The Gateway Main Street plan. And the consultant, we had a very successful community meeting a couple of weeks ago. I believe Vice Mayor Shula attended a portion of that. And they will be presenting some of the findings from that, and they have some different alternatives. And what you'll see is that some of the areas that they've identified align very close. Well, actually, they go very along the same lines as the red and the green line here. So we're kind of coming together for a larger plan that this would fit in the context of that. And thankfully that plan's not going to take 2 or 3 years. I think I might pass out before that happens. So I'm hoping that we will be done with that within a year. 18 months at the longest. We're making really good progress. Once we have our meeting with you in April, we should be moving along quite quickly. The other thing I wanted to mention is that planning staff just submitted yesterday, I believe, in collaboration with the Economic Development Department, a couple of 2 more grants with MTC ABAG. And one of those is for this area, which is identified as a PEA, or priority development area. And they had certain parameters for those grants, and Jay had spoken with them, collaborated with or coordinated with them closely, and so we would have a successful grant application. So our fingers are crossed, but we're fairly confident that we'll get it. It's to create what's called a sense of place plan. Some of the other cities in the South Bay area have done similar work, and it would identify specific, I think right along the lines of what you're talking about, Mayor Montano, the designs of the lights, right down to the benches, the trash, so that everything is coordinated and looks nice. So I wish that all those things would line up and we had them all ready to go tonight, but we should know within a month or so whether or not we get that grant, and that would be very similar to what you're talking about here. So that would go a long way toward paying grant funded, or at least for the planning and the design of those infrastructure improvements. And then we would incorporate that into those design elements into the specific plan itself.
Okay. All right, so, and as I mentioned, the focus is on those three blocks. It's not, all the way, because I know that'll be really expensive, so, in the short term, that one area, because that's a historic part of Main Street. So that's what we want to preserve and showcase to the community. And it's all about economic development, trying to revitalize, we can get tourists there, we can get, businesses to come there and bring revenue to the city. So that's the bottom line. Okay, so we'll move on with this one here. Is there a consensus for because what you just said about those study to go ahead and you're gonna look into it?
Yeah, we'll have to look if there's a power source suitable. And it's,
Can you speak?
sorry. We'll look into if there's a power source. And then you were looking at the 3 blocks, Carlo, Sarah, and Courtney. Is that correct?
Right,
Perfect.
because you said they use Cobra head, unique Cobra heads.
Yeah. It's the big tall
It's the whole
light
problem.
street. It looks like a cobra.
That's what I thought. All right, thank you. The next one is, I think it's selling short improvements. And that one has already been allocated. Skate park, Memorial Plaque, that one has already been allocated. Automated license plate readers, I think that one has already been allocated, correct? Navigation, now these are additional navigation center. I know this is going to take, because you have to find land, and everyone knows that land is very expensive. And we're only 16.3 square miles in Milpitas, so we don't have that time. But I'm thinking maybe we could work with the churches. And even if it is for 24 to 28, at least we can have some direction or a navigation center for our unhoused population. So I'm wondering if there's a consensus on that.
Mayor, if I could just ask, we're happy to take direction today here. We have thought that this would go to the next prioritization, but if council wishes to look at it today, then we can take that direction, but it'll be kind of outside of the other list, so just wanted to know that.
Okay, so what is, council want to do it now or put that on hold?
Put that on hold.
Okay. We'll put it on hold.
Well, I have some issues on this one.
Okay, next
Well,
one.
now that Chief here, Fernandez is here, you guys have any questions about the substation? I think we answered that one.
Yeah, let's finish this up so we can be on along. Larger. Oh, the sign, that was a clarification, that was a larger one. You're gonna come back on that one. The Cesar Chavez Community Center and
It's gonna be next time.
that is a smaller, what they wanted, because I wasn't sure what Parks and Rec Commission wanted, but they wanted smaller garden plots, and I think I remember when I was a liaison for that commission, they wanted smaller plots because there weren't enough, there's a huge waiting list, right? And they felt that if you have smaller plots, there will be more access for people to be able to have a plot. So that one, what is the council wish us to do on that one?
We wait until the
You wanna wait?
recommendation.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll consensus to wait for 24, 28.
Good job. I have a.
Oh, you have a question on that? Okay, Councilmember Barbadillo.
Way back, I was a liaison for the PRC as well, and I remember a lively discussion about, people on the waiting list on the existing garden. So if that's still, the outlet of most, retired, most of the people in this were retired people, right, seniors. I think that there is still, interest in that, then I think we should fund it and have them have their guidance.
Thank you. I'll just make some brief comments on this item. So the Parks, Recreation and Cultural Resources Commission discussed the garden. They discussed ways to address the equity to the garden because the list has been so long, as you mentioned. Both the mayor and Councilmember Barbadillo have been liaisons as well as now Councilmember Leland. So they're interested in bringing some updated rules and regulations to this council, which you'll see in April. Along with that recommendation as a way to help the equity to the community getting to the garden is to reduce the plot sizes. They're about 600 square feet per plot. So that was just another mechanism. So we don't have any pricing at this time. We just wanted to make sure that you saw that this was a recommendation, and should a project be approved, it would be as part of the future CIP program. So we just wanted to give you a heads up before we come to you in April and give you the full recommendation from that advisory body.
Okay, one last question. How long, which time that a person can use it a lot? Because if they're there for 20 years and you still have people on the waiting list, then perhaps we need to find another, maybe need to shorten the time that they need. So I'm hoping you'll be looking to that as well.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So right now there are no, I'll use term limits for lack of a better term for the use of the garden. So part of the recommendations that are coming to council in April, they are recommending term limits for the future.
Okay, great. And I will tell you, when I was in the Parks and Rec liaison, I think there was a person that was planting vegetables and selling them. So that issue came up as well. So that there was then you guys came up with some tighter restrictions, which was a good thing.
Right, the use is for personal consumption only, and that person is no longer an active participant in the garden. And we're not aware that anyone else is growing and then selling.
And when you think about it, if it's for personal consumption, you shouldn't have to have a huge lot. It's just supposed to be small. I think that's why the issue came. But we'll wait on your analysis on that. Thank you for that. The next one is the satellite consulate office, and this one here, there is no, oh, I'm sorry about that. I didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to echo Councilman Gary Barbadillo's comments. I'm supportive of it moving forward. The garden.
Okay, but I think they're gonna come back or with an analysis and then,
Yeah, it's just for the record.
okay, thank you. The next one is the consulate office. So this one is no cost, there's no price on there. But with, from what I have, observed is that we have the space right there in, it's a little storage area. You know, when you come into City Hall, come in and it's on the right-hand side. It used to be the MTV. Remember that area? So that was the site that I was thinking we could use that as a consulate. And to go back, to give some background on it, a consulate from, let's say, the Philippines, a representative from the Philippines, the Vietnam, Mexico, or other countries, they can share a day or maybe a couple hours a day to be able to have people that want to do business with dealing with the consulate at City Hall. So that was the vision. But there's no cost to this, and I don't know if there is, because basically you just have to clean a little room up and put a desk there and put a little sign there. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know what else it entails. But I'd like a consensus from the council if what they think, if that should move forward or if that should be waited. We should wait till another time. Councilor Van.
Yeah, so I think we should focus on local governing, and less on achieving foreign affairs services. I'm trying to understand the impetus behind this. If the consulate general's office reached out or if they mentioned a need for a satellite office. But I'm just confused as to why this is needed.
This was an idea.
Okay.
We have a huge immigrant population in Milpitas and from many countries. And I've spoken to a few residents and they like the idea, so I brought this up.
Yeah.
It depends on the concept. If you feel that it's not a good cause, then we won't move forward with it.
Okay, so it's a no for me.
So anybody else, council member Lynn?
Yeah, it's a no for me, number one. Number two, I don't think any consulate general is going to make the time to come to our city hall to meet the people of our city.
Well, I didn't think it was the consulate general themselves. It would be a representative from the consulate's office.
Well, we have to define why they are here. For what reason? Are they here to conduct meetings with our constituents? To meet with our staff? Or it is just public?
Yeah, I
And
want
then
to
I
add
think
on
it's
to that.
local government. Yeah, we're here in City Hall. Let's just take care of our city first. And once our city functions well, then we can expand and do any others.
Yeah.
Right now, we
Anybody-
don't
any
have
other
it.
ideas?
No, just a point of
Okay.
clarification or inquiry. So you mentioned representatives from other countries, consulates.
The consulate, I think there's one in San Francisco,
So you mentioned Vietnam.
China,
China.
Mexico, I don't know, the different countries, I don't know.
Cuba.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. No, just wanted to understand.
Any consulate that would want to, that is within the law. Or within our constitution. The state government. That would be. Of course, the city would have to look into it to see if it was possible and if it was legal. So those are just items. Councilmember Vice Mayor Chia.
I think your original idea, because I heard about this when I first started in council. I think I think your original idea is that the Philippine consulate, they have a satellite office anywhere. And instead of the residents going to San Francisco, they can go to this consulate office in Milpitas.
Yeah, that was the point.
Do their processing of passport, Philippine passport, or I don't know, citizenship, or anything related to that they would have to travel to San Francisco, but if they have a satellite office in Milpitas, they would do it here. I think that was your original idea.
Right,
Yeah.
so. And I don't want people putting words in their mouth, so that was the real, it was the actually the Filipinos were the ones that, asked me if the city would look into, stuff like that, because they have to travel all the way to San Francisco to do all their paperwork, they go to immigration and all that stuff. But if the consul does not want to, we can just move forward and skip that one. Do I see a consensus or just a non-consensus? I don't know. Okay, so let's know, we'll just skip that one.
Go forward. I'm okay with that.
Okay, so is there a yes or for you?
Yes.
Yeah. No.
Yes.
And for me, a yes, okay, but you can just look into it, all it is just researching it.
Right. I'll give a context if I may.
Okay, go ahead.
So so some consulate, it's not about the consulate visiting us, it's the services of the consulate to their citizenship, right? And I can relate to that. I'm not sure with any other demographic. When you come to this country, you're a green card holder, right? You're a citizen of that country. And what services most is the consulate of the country of origin. And prior to you becoming a citizen of this country, it takes time, and sometimes there are needs from different demographics that's being served by the consulate of the different countries, right? I can speak for the Filipino community, and I believe each and every demographic have this. They renew passports, they go to consulates outside of the city, and or any other needs like apostille for some documents that they need in their country to process until such time that they become fully and embrace the U.S. citizenship, right? For example, the Philippine consulate conducts a mobile consulate, and they do it by the seafood marketplace in a certain dates of a month or some recently. And I know that's again. I believe that this is a service that's being offered by other countries as well. So it could be possible, and I think it's that program with the Philippine Embassy is no longer happening. It's either by logistics or budget or whatnot, but it's undeniable that Milpitas has a significant numbers of population of different demographics. So let's just see if it helps the community, particularly in some segments, as to serve the joy. Somebody just blow out for me. Okay, Daniel, you got it.
That's.
Don't see any spark.
Amelia.
Research and see what are the legal parameters, and if it's not gonna work out, then it won't work out.
Right.
I can look at it. Thank you. And the last one is Gill Park additional lighting. This was, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, mostly for safety, because there are no lights at night, so it's gonna be dark. And also, at summertime, they can play if there are lights. These are the Gill Park. They have lights at the basketball court, they have lights at the tennis courts, but they don't have lights at the pickleball area. Also, thinking about this, if I may, Mayor, I would like to ask staff for a list of all the parks that do not have lights. Oh. I would like to ask staff for the parks that do not have lights. Is there an inventory of that? That's for the next, before the CIP final discussion. I would like to see that as well.
Vice Mayor, can I ask for a clarification on the request? I know parks have different types of lights. There's some lights that are used for actually night use, like
Right,
sports
that
field
one.
lighting. And then there's certain lights in parks that are used just dimly for safety reasons. And so, ask Director Lawrence if you'd like any more clarification on that.
I was just gonna ask if you're asking for court lighting or field lights, because we can get that inventory pretty quickly.
Oh, good. What's the difference?
Well, fields versus sport courts. So like tennis courts and basketball courts versus sport fields.
Oh, I see. Okay, whatever it is that will make the park safe and usable for night sports.
Night
How's
sports.
that?
Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
And we have based on the other direction we received tonight, we're gonna do an informational memorandum on report on the status of the ARPA projects, and we can include
Right.
that information in that same report.
And if I may, Mayor, if it's okay I would like to add also for the CIP can we address the flooding in front of the library? We see this every year when there's rain, heavy rain, there's flooding right in front of the library. We need to address that because the residents, they get tired of it. They say, we see this every year. What are you guys doing? Let's do something. Okay, address this flooding in front of the library. Yes, okay. Yeah, great. Also, about the 450,000 for offices for the staffing for the city attorney. It's very difficult. My office is right there. It's right next to a couple of cubicles that are empty. They're being used for storage. Why can't we use that instead of spending 450,000? Also, I would like to challenge executive team to create dual purpose cubicles, because you guys are working 2 days out of the week at home. Dedicate 2 or 3 cubicles when somebody's coming in and can use that cubicle with computers, with with everything there. All they have to do is bring their whatever they need, their binders or whatever. You don't have to fully dedicate everything for a person when that person only works 2 or 3 times a week. That's my thought on that one. That's it for now. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Vice Mayor, if you'd like me to address the
Please.
need for offices, whereas we can keep some staff in cubicles. Much of the work that's done by myself and by the assistant city attorney and potential deputy city attorney and law clerk is attorney-client privileged, and so telephone conversations can't be made out in the open, meetings can't be had out in the open. Those need to take place in closed offices, and that's why that particular point is important, to maintain those privileges.
Have we looked, Mayor, please, have we looked at the other, I don't want to say it, but I will. Have we looked at the reassigning other personnel with cubicles, with offices to cubicles? I think that would be management. I know, but what I'm saying is, I'm just concerned that 450,000, that's a lot to house One person? In an office?
So the 400,000 would be for the enclosure of the area between finance and the city council offices. It would be an office each for myself, for an assistant city attorney, a cubicle for the admin staff, and then excuse me, one multi-purpose room that would function as an office when there's the temporary law clerk that needs that kind of privacy for attorney-client privilege issues, and then could function as a conference room when there's no law clerk. So it would be 3 offices and then the cubicle area in the center.
So I recommend you look to see if there's any other space, and if there's not, then just.
Have you looked at other spaces? I mean.
I'm not sure.
I go up there, third floor, second floor, there's a lot of empty, and I go there. I mean, I think you too, go there a lot, there's a lot of empty offices.
And maybe you guys can take the tour up there
Yeah, we did.
again.
But
To point out to us.
he can do that himself. Anyway, so I'm gonna hold up on that 450,000. That's my one goal.
Mayor, Councilmember Barbara.
We did have an assistant city attorney before, and I remember his office is right besides the finance director. What happened to the office? Or is it just me already in city hall? There was a assistant city attorney's office. It's the corner one.
Sorry, before my time.
That's a female, right?
No, it's
Do you recall? Yes. So that bank of offices that Councilmember Barbadillo was talking about, that are next to our Lawrence office now, they did have the deputy city attorney there. Those offices are now occupied by finance staff. But you are correct, there was a deputy city attorney and her office was there. Once upon a time.
Assistant city attorney.
Yeah,
yeah, there
correct.
is two
Yeah.
dedicated room there for both deputy and staff.
Correct, you're right, Councilman.
So, yeah, make them, I recommend that you look to see if there's any spaces. If not, then we'll just go ahead and move forward with it. With it. Yeah,
Well, they said you can take me off.
You can check my office.
okay. All right, so, is there anything else that any of the council members want? And Anthony, sorry.
Yeah,
Councilmember.
no, I do think, I think there's a good point. A lot of these conversations, legal issues and whatnot, are, sensitive information and, you know, like with no walls in between, there's a risk of that, you know, getting out and having at liability and potential harm. So, that's why, you know, I would be supportive of the request. But, you know, like this is something that was proposed before by the previous legal team. At the end of the day, you know, it's just general best practice for confidentiality purposes.
Don't get me wrong, I understand what the speaker attorney does, right? All I'm saying is, you know, if we are resourceful and if there's no alternative, let's do it. Let's get, because as I said, if memory serves me well, there's 3 offices for attorneys before. And it's no longer available because we have increased the number of staff from finance that took over these offices and we don't have a choice then yes, let's do it. All I believe we were asking is let's be resourceful and you know, we come back, we need it, then That's not provided, because we really need it, and I don't understand your workings.
Right. So, going back to your conversation with our finance director, was there a consensus for that? Because I didn't, somebody didn't ask. So was there a consensus for the 16, what was it, 16.1 million?
1.8 million. My own opinion or vote is not to proceed this year, but go ahead with the HRIS, which we have the funding for, and wait and see what we learn from that experience, and maybe put this again in the 24-25 budget. That's my recommendation.
So let's ask some of the, who's come with you, yes or no?
Vice Mayor, I dealt with financial softwares before too. If you have a whole package with inventory, AR, AP, GL, and a whole 9 yards, if you separate one of the module, it makes it very difficult for them to do their work because it's not in sync. Because it's not, it's like you're having two different accounting softwares to do one job. So if you are going to say, nope, you're not supportive of it, then a complete no. But if you are going to say, let's do HRIS, then you have to approve all in one as the whole accounting package. For the software that they ask
Let's
you
go for
for.
a consensus of Anthony.
I support the staff recommendation. I'm not an HR expert, but I have confidence in our in your professional judgment.
Okay, I heard it's a vision. I haven't heard justification, so I'm with Vice Mayor Chua's recommendation that we try the first system first and inspiring to me, and then we will come back with that.
Director, like, is it, am I on that path explaining or, correctly, or am I off?
So through the mayor, may I add to, I think the clarification is, is it a vision? Is it currently broken? May I speak to that?
Go ahead.
It's both, right? It's currently broken in that, I'm going to break it down to something very fundamental. Each position has a classification title. That title has a discrete number. That number is called position control. It ensures the integrity of 500 positions in our system. Our current system doesn't even do that. I just want to put that in perspective. Now we want to do an HRIS system that piggybacks off of Kayenta. It's not going to work. We want longevity information. We want seniority information. That all currently sits in Kayenta and it doesn't exist. And so if you desire for us to go forward with HRIS as a standalone system, it will be very limited because it can't attach to anything meaningful. Does that make sense? So I just want to be very transparent about something very tangible, because the system we have right now, it's not functional. We have a lot of work around. And so for us to invest in an HRIS system is not going to work and be meaningful.
Yeah, thank you. In any system, legacy system, which you're calling your system right now, financial system, your legacy system, and you're bringing in an HRIS system. There is an interface. And the interface will connect the HRIS system to your legacy system, which you are planning to replace anyway. What I'm saying, the RFP should be tight to make sure that it's compatible with the financial systems that you will be introducing in hopefully in a year. But I just don't want to go through with a big project like financial systems right now. This is big. And I'm sure it's not gonna cost us $3.2 million. It's gonna cost more. I know for a fact that is true. So I want us to learn from the HRIS system, from the specification to contract negotiation to everything. I want us to learn first on a smaller scale, then tackle on a bigger project. That's where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So it seems like we have two that are for and two for, so I guess I'm the swing vote. So I have to, it's a tough decision. We all have to agree to disagree, but we do it with respect. And I'm going to go with staff because staff, you guys are the experts. And you know this, I know I think when I was teaching, we had to go to professional courses, take professional growth courses, and you learn all the new state-of-the-art coursework. So I really feel that you know what you're talking about because you're in the trenches, you know what you're doing. And I also heard from Liz, and I've known Liz, I know what her job, what it entails. So I'm gonna have to go with your, because you're the experts and you guys know what you're doing with. So that would be my, for that. So, I'm
Just
sorry.
a comment for the 3.3 million.
Go ahead.
Two
Karen.
questions. One, does Vice Mayor's thoughts make sense?
I'm sorry, what thoughts?
What her thoughts-
Reference to.
her
All
thoughts
the
and steps.
interface and all the technicalities.
Yes, so let's explain this concept of interface. Interface is like taking two discrete systems and having them talk to each other. Yeah, so this concept of interface is taking two discrete systems and having them talk to each other. The information can go one way or it could go bilaterally. But there have to be meaningful joins. Right? It's got to have meaningful joins. If this system over here doesn't have anything meaningful to join to, you're not interfacing to anything. So I'll keep to that example. Position control number does not exist in Kayenta very well. We have a new HR system and we want to interface it to Kayenta. There's no interface join there. So yes, the concept does exist, but what are we going to join to? Because we have a system that is a quarter of a century old. That's the design is 25 years old. And we're going to put in something that's 2024. It's not relevant.
All right, second question. So you claim it's broken. Since when it was broken?
We have a lot of workarounds. And so
Since when it was broken? I know that there's workaround, there's a lot of stuff. The question is, you claim it's broken. Since when it's broken?
I'll clarify. Over time, as things don't work, we write customized report. We have shadow systems called spreadsheets, manila folders. We have other systems. So for example, we don't do budgeting in Kayenta. We have OpenGov. We don't do capital assets in Kayenta. We have Sage. So it has not worked over time. And we have then compensated through all of these patchwork and a lot of manual reconciliations.
So we save position if we invest the 3.3 and we will no longer need as much stuff as we need.
It's
right.
What's the game?
Well, the question is, you said that you want this system to work itself. And you're claiming that it's been working for a while because it's generating so much human time.
Right.
Would that mean that if we invest in this one, we can, we can at least start some positions in finance?
As a business investor, as a taxpayer, I look at it like, what is the return on this investment, right? Which is really this question, which is a real enterprise system should create more value added work. We have highly competent analysts who are doing reconciliation, lots of paperwork, fetching a lot of info. The system's going to do that work. So their time being paid by taxpayers will result in better work, better outcome.
Right.
They're not going to be doing the paper stuff. They could actually add more value because we're actually applying their competency. So we're going to yield different work because they're going to be spending their time differently. Over time, if council and management determines we could save a job here or there, it can happen. But I'm not saying that that's really the goal, because the goal is to translate how someone spends 40 hours a week for the purpose of better value work for taxpayers. And I want to be transparent about that.
All I'm just saying is, we're talking, everything that you have presented is a need, right? Look at our deficiency. If we do not approve that sewer and water rates increase in March, we're in trouble. So what I'm trying to see is, look, let's see the dollar amounts we allot to each and every project. And the only question I have with your recommendation is it needed? Because the first time you said it's a vision, now you're saying that we need it. Do we need it now? That's the question.
I think this is all valid. So I think to be transparent and also show that it's an incremental process, council will still have governance over this, a lot of governance. And I'll explain to you how. In a couple of weeks, we'll come back to you and add to the Plant Moran contract. That'll show that we want to show you how we're going to do the ERP. The ERP project is going to be RFP. We're going to do first, let's ping the market, see what comes back. We're going to analyze it. We're not going to be summarily executing the contract. We're going to bring some of this back to council and explain to you, right? Because we can't authorize the contract itself. So with that process, we will then be able to explain to you, here's some major gaps, some opportunities. Here's what this system will cost and what it will yield. Here are the modules that we're looking at. Because while we're looking at the real modules, we may look at the market and look at the cost and look at some of the trade-offs and say, oh, utility billing, given the cost and what we're going to gain, we may not do that. Does that make sense? So tonight's action is to say, yes, move forward. But you will still, as council, have a tremendous amount of governance over this process because we still have to come to you for approval of certain actions over the next several years.
All I'm asking is, do we need it now? All right. That's.
Okay. I thought I did. Battery was flashing. I'll make it quick. To me, we are here as a body to govern, and I feel and I believe that if we want the staff, see, it's out of battery. If we want the staff to do a good job, to do their, equip them, give them the means of doing their job. I'm sure, Director Lai is not going to say, okay, it's time to spend another $3 million and here's the ask. There's a reason for it. And if they are going to do the building on time, making sure that all of our residents receive the bill and pay the bill, if they can pay it online, there's so many functions and there are staffs in the building that under your supervision. And if you have the right tools for them, you are going to give them the leeway of doing their work and not to do papers, not to go on Sage. I know how Sage works. It's limited. You are not going to use everything once. Not going to have to sit there and use two different software to run one city. So this is just my thought.
Thank you for the comments. Okay, so there's a consensus to move forward with that. Thank you. And is there anything else that any of them? Okay, so do you know what we're going to be? So do you want to wrap it up?
Yes, I think Matt wanted to say something and then I can wrap it.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just summarizing some, I was taking some notes on the direction. I just want to summarize that. So on the police station substation feasibility, we're going to look at possibly broadening the study to a little bit more citywide analysis in addition to the site specific analysis of the parcels that we discussed. On the community garden at Persona, we're going to ask the community the location they want the garden. We're going to ask the community if there's anything else in addition to the garden, any other amenities or any other uses for that property that they may want. On pickleball, from what I think I heard, was going to hold off on the allocation for now until we come back to you with a proposal on how more dual use could be used at a facility. The teen center, we are moving forward with that feasibility analysis. On parks, we're going to provide an informational memorandum with the detailed status of the ARPA projects and a list of the parks that do and don't have sports field lighting. On Main Street, we're going to provide further information on our planning director mentioned when we come back to council. And we'll also be looking into some maybe suitable power sources on Harwood Corning and continue to look for opportunities to advance that project. The consulate office, we're going to do some research into whether there's any desire from the consulates to have that location, and then look into any legal parameters that exist. Moving forward, financial management system. For now, until possibly the next prioritization session, we're going to hold off on the navigation center, the library sign, and the Cesar Chavez Gardens, but we will talk about those at the next priority station. And then we'll also look into the flooding in front of the library. And on the city attorney's office, we'll look to see if there's any other opportunities at City Hall. Otherwise, we'll continue to move forward. That is a recommendation in the budget.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.
Wait, just one moment before we close that. I'll give you another one. Thank you for that. Let's go home here. Okay, let's go. I thought it was right.
Seeing your minute. I remember after you go, okay.
So any comments from staff? Okay, well,
Just
this
want to
meeting,
thank you
oh,
for
thank
your
you.
time. And
Thank you for all your hard work too, each and every one of you. Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone.
I don't know, I'm gonna say. I don't know if they're gonna say it.
Everyone wanted to get out and help.
So wow. But he had.
You're extra relevant.
And then he's.
No, because
He's saying it's having a small break.
not with RSV, dealing with RSV.